Emma's been a good friend of mine for, I guess, over 5 years now. I think the first time we met each other, we were making demonstration signs to go out and demonstrate to save California's last nuclear plant, Diablo Canyon, which makes about a fifth of all the carbon-free electricity in the state, for about 3 million people. Big nuclear plant. But since then, I've gotten to know a bit more about Emma's backstory, and she'll share some with you as well. But she basically grew up in the woods in Montana, spent a lot of time in Yellowstone, and then got with an environmental studies degree, went and kind of looked into what ecotourism is like, and what that's like for the people who are there, who actually live in the places that us in the in the wealthy world tour for fun, right? And that gave her, I think, a up close look at energy poverty, and it's started on a through line all the way to today, when she's working on decarbonizing a part of the world with Oklo's super innovative microreactor design. But yeah, without any further ado, Emma, I'll turn it over to you, and you can start screen sharing whenever you like.
Yeah, thanks so much, Eric. And I'm excited to be here. It is crazy that we've known each other for over 5 years. But leading back to what Eric just said, this is a picture of me at East Rosebud in Montana. I live right outside of Yellowstone National Park in a place called Red Lodge, about 60 miles away. I'm wearing a shirt right now or in this picture, that says Save Diablo. And so that's the Diablo Canyon. It's a nuclear power plant in California that Eric and I met advocating to keep open. When Eric and I met, I had not become a nuclear engineer yet. I started doing nuclear advocacy before I even started my master's in nuclear engineering. And I'm going to start out by telling you a little bit of my story of why I decided to become a nuclear engineer. And then I'm going to, provide some context on energy, which I know many people here probably already have, but just it's important to me to contextualize and discuss what the problems we're actually facing are. And then I'm going to go into specifically advanced reactors and microgrids, because that's what Eric suggested I talk about, was microreactors, which is what I currently work on. I'm always happy to talk more generally about any questions or concerns about nuclear power, though you also have Eric as a wonderful resource on that. So, and I'm a Redfoot. Like Eric said, I grew up in Montana. I went to school in Portland, Oregon to Lewis and Clark College for a degree in environmental studies. My focus was on ecotourism, and more specifically volunteer tourism. While I was in school, I lived on an organic permaculture farm on the coast of Ecuador for 6 months. Here's me with my horse that I had named Ohm, that I called Ohm, wearing a Bob Marley shirt, because that's what you did, when you're an environmental studies student from Portland. So lived there, got really interested in volunteer tourism because I saw all these volunteers coming to these countries and kind of wondered why and what help they were. One thing that I learned from my time in Ecuador, and then I returned and I went to Peru and lived in Cusco, Peru for 6 months with a grant. While I was in Peru, I went and talked to a lot of non-governmental organizations down there, some that were run by local Peruvians, some that were run by foreigners. And what I learned is that local people make the biggest difference. They're the ones that understand what their community needs. They're the ones that are able to really put solutions into place. But I also knew that energy was access to energy and increased energy consumption has been demonstrated time and time again to lead to increased access to healthcare, increased access to education, women's rights, increasing And so I came back to the US and was like, I don't know really, I don't know really what to do next, because I see like local people in those communities as being really the leaders that those areas need. And so I learned a lot about energy, because I saw energy as being an important part of trying to change the world. I think it's the least understood, most important thing in this world. So came back, read a bunch about energy for about a year, lived in Montana, and like after reading a lot, recognized that nuclear, I viewed as needing to be a part of our future energy mix. So I went back to school, got all my engineering prereqs, and got my master's in nuclear engineering at the University of Idaho. And now I work for Oklo, which is an advanced fission company developing very, very small reactors that can be deployed for like dispersed energy systems. So this is me on the backside of Machu Picchu. This is me in Montana. This is me in Ecuador. And then when I worked at Diablo Canyon as an intern, this is me dressed out in the full kind of funny suit. So one thing that I think that we all are aware of is that we need a lot of clean energy to replace fossil fuels, which fossil fuels are clearly the dominant source of power everywhere, almost everywhere in the world. Not everywhere, but like the world is completely reliant on fossil fuels at this point. And not only do we need to generate a lot of to replace fossil fuels, we also need to generate even more energy in order to bring people out of poverty. So you can see Africa is largely the country that is Africa is largely the continent that it has extreme poverty. It's also the area that consumes the least amount of electricity, has the highest population growth rate, which means these are the areas that are going to need to start consuming a lot more electricity if they're going to have a high quality of life and be able to pursue the lives that they want to lead. So the problem isn't just we need to replace fossil fuels, it's that we need to replace fossil fuels plus generate even more electricity, plus use electricity to replace transportation and industrial sector and all of these things that I think we all are worried about. One of the things that really bothered me in my environmental studies degree was recognizing that it also, like, the United States has already burned all of these emissions to reach a state of being a modern industrialized country, and really the developed world has no legs to stand on in terms of telling other countries that they can't do the same thing. So we have to provide better energy solutions for these countries to implement if we want to really help them. We can't say you can't consume electricity. We just have to give them better options. So, my view is that we need to do everything that we can. On the left, all of you, I'm sure, are familiar with the IPCC, the Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change. Clearly, nuclear is one of the lowest emitting power sources, and that's full life cycle emissions. So everything from mining through operation, through managing the back end. And then nuclear is, this is from the Energy Information Administration. Nuclear is the largest source of emissions-free power in this country, and has been for decades. So I saw that as being, to sum up why I decided to become a nuclear engineer, because I saw it as being scalable, reliable, and clean. That's like I basically saw nuclear as having the most solvable problems. That's not to say it doesn't have problems, clearly does, but I saw them as being the most solvable, and wanted to help support that mission. So what I also saw was that the options are really nuclear and renewables, having immense natural resources such as hydro and geothermal. So geothermal in places like Iceland, or a largely fossil fuels grid. And France, of course, has a lot of nuclear. Germany has been, building coal plants as they've been shutting down their nuclear plants. I hope this changes. this is, it's very concerning to see places like Germany being so reliant on natural gas from Russia as well as on coal. But at this point, what we've been historically been able to do to decarbonize is largely nuclear and hydro. So what about the future of nuclear? Here is a picture on the right of the Oklo Aurora. So this is the company I work for. We are the first advanced reactor company to have a combined license application submitted to the Nuclear Regulatory Commission and accepted for technical review. This picture, as you can see in this picture, this is about the size of a house, of a large house in terms of footprint. So it's very small. The Aurora is about 1.5 megawatts electric. To put that into context, it's very, very, very small. To put that into context, Diablo Canyon is 2,200 megawatts electric. So this is really enough to power, about 1,000 homes. On the side of it, these are solar panels that are decorated by local artists to reflect that local community. So really trying to demonstrate that nuclear and renewables can work well together. I'm going to talk through these 5 points they have under advanced fission on the next slide. The last one is to support decentralized power systems, which is what I was kind of asked to talk about for this presentation. So advanced fission has the benefits of existing nuclear power plants. So it's reliable and flexible. For what I also need to clarify, I use the term fission, which is a form of nuclear power. It's the form that's in all existing nuclear plants today. I use that partially just to have some clarity around fission versus fusion, which fusion is, things coming together. Fission is things splitting apart. So advanced, and then the term advanced just means honestly that there's no water in the main primary system. We've actually had advanced nuclear power plants for decades. So it's a confusing term, but it really just references the specific technology type. So nuclear power plants are some of the most resilient sources of power in this country. You can see that through the hurricanes that they've operated through. They were the most reliable electricity during the cold snap that shut down Texas's electric grid. They can be used for emergency power in the aftermath of natural disasters. Advanced can really provide this ability. So that is they do things like you can put nuclear reactors on boats. Clearly, we do that a lot with the Navy, and you can bring that into a place like Puerto Rico I just got back from Puerto Rico, so that's on my mind. If they have a natural disaster, transmission takes less time to get back up than generation does. So you can come in, provide that generation for while these countries, recover. And then advanced fission plants can operate all of the time, but a lot of them are being designed with flexibility in mind to work well with renewables. So scalable, this shows that nuclear has been one of the fastest deployments of low carbon electricity in the world, with existing nuclear power plants. Advanced fission takes into consideration having that our grid has changed since this, and that we have different customers. So advanced nuclear power plants come in all different sizes, and you can deploy them using factory fabrication, using lessons learned from other industries, so that you can quickly deploy these systems all around the world. You can see here that the green is nuclear, the blue is hydro, and the purple is wind. And you can see that nuclear is one of the fastest deployments. And that's also what this chart is showing, is that nuclear and hydro have been incredible tools for decarbonizing, and advanced fission can do that as well. So also, we don't talk enough about, well, I don't talk here enough discussion in the climate space about decarbonizing the industrial sector and process heat applications. Industry, it makes up 23% of the greenhouse gas emissions in this sector. We can electrify as much of that as possible, but advanced fission power plants also generate really high temperature heat, so they can be used really efficiently for all kinds of industrial processes. Sorry for this really confusing graph, but I wanted to show that these are some examples of industrial processes that high temperature advanced fission power plants can provide, can use process heat to help decarbonize. High temperature gas reactors and molten salt reactors are examples of high temperature advanced fission reactors that could be used in lieu of coal for these processes. And then one of the things that's most important, I think, to me and to probably many people out there, is that advanced fission can reduce the overall nuclear waste burden. And so, the Oklo Aurora will be consuming was now considered nuclear waste as its first to power its first reactor. It's actually fuel from this experimental reactor, the experimental breeder reactor 2. But about between 90 and 95% of what we currently consider nuclear waste can be used as fuel to power advanced reactors, which has the environmental benefits of reducing the overall waste burden at the end of life, as well as reducing mining. And nuclear, of course, is about 3 million times as energy dense as coal, so it requires a lot less mining. But if we could, mining no matter what has environmental degradation, so if we can eliminate that, that would be optimal. And this is not like the theory of using waste as fuel is not a theory. It's a proven process. It's been something that was demonstrated in experimental breeder reactor 2, which was operated in INL for Idaho National Lab for about 30 years. So now this is the topic that I was kind of asked to talk about. So advanced fission can also have decentralized power for as I mentioned, advanced fission comes in a bunch of different sizes. So distributed energy systems can be more resilient. I'll talk about that in a little bit. Some different categories of modern reactor design are microreactors and small modular reactors. And those come in different sizes. You can add more reactors after you build the first one to add more power as your population grows or as your demand goes up. And ultimately, what I like about decentralized power systems is that they allow for local communities to have more control over their energy and more say in their energy sources. So I talk about this as microgrids. Microgrids often refer to like a specific type of distributed energy system, but I'm gonna use that term. So there's lots of microgrids out there. Universities use them a lot. Hospitals use them a lot to ensure reliable electricity. Alcatraz has a pretty big one, but it's also combined heat and power which we have in every state. We have a bunch of combined heat and power systems. That's what I see as being the most valuable potential for microgrids is that you can really reduce risk, as I say over here, by having multiple outputs. And so, if you use combined heat and power when electricity is really cheap and it doesn't make sense to sell to the grid, you could use that extra power for, producing synthetic fuels or hydrogen or clean water through desalination. In those processes, you can use either heat or electricity to produce that other product. So that reduces risk because you have different products. It also means that we use our power sources most efficiently. And that can also work well with renewables. And so renewables, if as renewables increase, like solar increases in the middle of the day, you can put your extra nuclear power into an industrial process in the middle of the day. And then when we go down at the end of the day, when solar goes down at the end of the day, you can switch back to nuclear being added to the grid. Sorry. So there are many microgrids operating today. As I mentioned, they can be both urban and remote. They can be connected to a larger grid or stand by themselves, and they can enable resiliency. But the problem with them is that pretty much all microgrids rely on diesel generators at this point, including in hospitals, because they're reliable and but they're really, really dirty and they're really expensive. So if you are a remote community, for example, you might be paying over $1 a kilowatt hour for electricity, which could be up to a quarter of people's income for remote communities in places like Alaska. So if you replace that diesel generator with a microreactor, that can enable a resilient energy system that the local people can contribute to deciding that they want those power sources, and it can be clean, so it won't have negative health impacts due to either air pollution or climate change. So now I'm kind of at the end of this. I wanted to definitely leave some time for Q&A. I know I ran through that really quickly. So looking forward to further discussion here. These are some books that I recommend that I learned a lot from when I was researching energy. And then in summary, the world needs a lot of clean energy, and it will for the foreseeable future. We need all clean energy solutions, and nuclear power is proven scalable, clean source of electricity. Advanced reactors have some additional benefits, and this is just the beginning of this discussion. Please feel free to contact me if you want to have future discussions. And then I'm just gonna.
All right, thanks so much, Emma. It's awesome.
Hey, Emma, I've got a quick question. When you're talking about these microgrids that you guys produce at Oklo, and are they really designed to replace like that single very large generator for a single building? Is that how small you're really talking about, or would it would be for a larger area?
I mean, it could be for the first deployments. It'll probably be for a larger area, because we're looking at remote deployments. The first one's going to be actually out in Idaho, in Idaho National Lab. But ultimately, this is a system. These systems could be put in in buildings like skyscrapers or something that uses a good amount of electricity. But yeah, I could, urban deployments, you could see using this to power single buildings if they use enough electricity.
What about the security aspect? And again, I'm just speaking without a lot of knowledge about this, other than the fact that you've got today the larger existing nuclear plants are some of the most secure environments that you have anywhere, right? They're virtually impenetrable. You can't walk up to the building itself. They're surrounded by fencing and guards and all forms of vetting before anybody can get close to it. If you're going to be deploying these microgrids, is there a concern about access to those and who can access from a safety perspective? Any comments on that? Or?
Yeah, that's a great question, and something that we have microreactors all over the country right now. They're research and test reactors, so that are larger than what we're proposing, and they operate safely. Some of the things that we do that ensure that, okay, so where there is the greatest risk for security issues or for somebody stealing that material is when you take the fuel out of the reactor. So we don't for the Aurora, we do not refuel. The fuel is always in the reactor. And there's no way a person could get into that to where the reactor is the reality. But if they did and they opened that up somehow, they would not survive that. So there's a self-protecting aspect of the fuel, and having it so that we're not storing extra nuclear materials on site is, makes it so that it's really quite secure. The other side there is, like I said, the research and test reactors that have been operating safely all over this country that have, more nuclear materials than what these microreactors have.
Could you stop sharing your screen for a moment so that we can see everybody? Because others have questions and such. So, right.
I have a question, or well, a couple of questions, I guess. But the first one is about the water cooling in it, and I think you said that these microreactors don't need water cooling or something like that. And is that true? And how do they cool? Well, I'll just leave it at that.
Okay, that's a great question. Yes, that is true. So advanced reactors in general don't use water in their primary system, is what it's called. What we use is just basically a superconductor, a system that's a superconductor that removes heat from the reactor core. But advanced reactors in general use all types of different materials. So things like molten salts. So for molten salt reactors that are things like potassium fluoride, and there's things like sodium fast reactors. They use sodium. There's lead cooled fast reactors. They use lead. So there's lots of different alternatives to water to remove heat. That's one thing that's hard when talking about advanced reactors in general, is that they're also different. That they serve different purposes. That the fact that there's this weird discussion of like pro-nuclear, anti-nuclear, it's like there's such different technologies.
Right.
Thank you.
Other questions?
Yeah, I have a question. Charlie. I have a question, if I may, follow up to Charlie's comment relating to the security. And thank you, by the way, Emma. I really enjoyed the presentation. I look forward to investigating some of those books that you listed out. One of my part of my question is, one, as it relates to security, can you speak a bit to the level of enrichment that's necessary for these advanced and/or micro reactors to function? I thought I read at some point that there was additional enrichment that could potentially put these into weapons grade status, and that would be a security concern. And kind of the part two of the question is, if that is the case, deployment of these micro reactors might have some similar security or challenges, like transporting other energy supplies, whether it's crude oil or some other energy that is also hazardous. And could you speak to those a little bit, please?
Yeah, those are great questions. There's definitely no way that anybody's using weapons grade fuel. That would never happen, because it's just, you don't need it for one. Like weapons grade, there's a lot of things that are baked into that term, but just in general, it's 95% enriched, and you're not getting anywhere close to that. Advanced reactors are all looking at low enriched uranium. And then on top of that, the makeup of the different isotopes that are in that, in a lot of these nuclear fuels, make it so that it really could not be made into a bomb unless you had really a government scale effort put into it that we can really pick up on through, satellites and energy consumption. It's a huge process to enrich to that level. But I appreciate that question. And then the transportation question, and this is a discussion that is a good discussion to have in general. It's not really about advanced. And it's something that, you want to make sure people feel comfortable with having these facilities in their communities, and and transporting materials through it. Of course, for us, we just have one fuel load, so it really doesn't have that much transportation. You know, diesel is being transmitted. You have to take that all of the time. That decreases reliability as well as has the potential for spilling. We do one core load for 20 years, which is, you know, a very different challenge. You know, transportation of nuclear materials is really fun to look up on YouTube. There's the kind of engineering that goes into those and how they are tested. That, you know, it's being dropped from on a spike from 20 meters and being lit on fire at like certain degrees for like 30 minutes and then put underwater for an extended period of time. And the reality is we transmit more hazardous materials, like you said, like we transmit hazardous materials all the time. We transmit biological hazardous materials, chemical hazardous materials. Nuclear is relatively, compared to some things, it's relatively easier to clean up. You have to, you know, take off, but given a scenario that, you know, would be insane, like they run trains into the waste transportation canisters, they run airplanes into them. It's pretty cool to see on YouTube, but you know, these are solvable problems that we really have already come up with solutions for, while, you know, I see every energy source having its challenges. But those are great questions. Thanks.
Hey, Bill Middlecamp, you had a question?
Yeah, thanks. I have a couple of questions around the idea of how quickly this can be deployed. So you had mentioned that 20% of electricity is from nuclear. I believe you use that number. But in terms of the actual total energy usage of the world, it's only about 2%. So there's quite a lot of, you know, if we're going to address carbon, there's quite a lot of ground to cover there. So I'm wondering about do you, at Oklo, have you done projections on how quickly this can be in first deployment and then how quickly it can be scaled up? Do you have numbers for the total penetration by the end of the century, for example?
Thanks. Yeah, thanks for that question. I think this is a challenge that's facing all clean energy sources. It's not just nuclear. And thanks, Eric, for pointing out that it's about 10% of electricity worldwide. Energy is a different topic, which, you know, clearly energy also means industrial processes and transportation, which are 100% fossil fuels, basically at this point. And so we're talking about everything needing to rapidly scale in a way that has never been seen before. And, you know, nuclear deployment, I think, can be done very quickly. I'm not allowed, not allowed, but I don't feel comfortable discussing like I'm not here representing Oklo, so I don't feel comfortable discussing what those like projections are. But, you know, we have the first application in for an advanced nuclear power plant, and that will be deployed in the early to mid 2020s. Then you can use factory fabrication to scale that up and deploy worldwide. Everyone in clean energy needs to be thinking bigger, and everyone in clean energy is facing the same issue in terms of deployment time. Renewables have a lot of issues with transmission. Siting a transmission line in this country takes about 10 years. So, and renewables tend to require more transmission. So everything has its issues. And we need to be shifting our paradigm of thinking. One thing that I think that nuclear could learn and gain from a lot from wind and solar was that they had a grassroots movement that supported them and you know, permitted them to grow even when you would point to them and say, this can't scale and this costs too much. Which it's funny to see those same arguments now being from the same people who supported wind and solar for so long, being, you know, lobbed at nuclear, when it's like, yeah, so we need to have all the support we can to deploy them faster.
So, okay. So I'm very curious to know that information about how rapidly this could be scaled up. Is there any source you can recommend where people are addressing that?
I can respond to this one if you want, Emma. You can certainly add to what I'm going to say. But the crazy thing about this question is that it doesn't seem to be answered on the internet that often. You see a lot of smoke and mirrors. So I was like, all right, I got to figure out what was the fastest deployments of clean energy throughout history. So we took the most recent BP World Energy Review, which is one of the best sources of statistical data on, like, how much solar Burundi is using this year, or any country, and how much has that changed year to year. And one of my volunteers wrote a Excel script that takes the highest 5-year average of how fast people built clean electricity per person. And then we brought it down to, we took those 5-year averages and said, okay, what's the per person per year? How fast have we built out electricity? And what you discover is that about the fastest we've ever done it was Norway with hydro. And they went at about, the number is 1,400. So if we're going to do primary energy, of course, looked at this for the world. So that's heat, transportation, electricity, all that stuff together. To get to globally European standards of living by 2050, we have to go at 1,700. So 1,400 is fastest with Norway, 1,700. The next number.
What are the units for those numbers?
Kilowatt hours per person per year. I should probably screen share. I'm just like speaking numbers to you guys. It's not cool. But I'll just do real briefly on this point, just because I was just looking all this stuff up recently and doing this math. Okay. All right. So here we got Norway with their crazy hydro build out. Sweden's the next fastest with 600 with nuclear throughout the 80s. And then it's a lot of nuclear, a little bit of hydro. Wind, Norway was pretty fast. I don't know why this number is in here, but it's like 240 something. But anyway, this is how fast we'd have to go to get there. Sorry, this is 1,700 kilowatt hours per person per year, and 240 if it's just electricity, which we've done. So yeah, we got to scale up everything in an unreal amount never before seen. You got to go down quite a bit to find solar finally in Australia, which had the fastest build out. We got to just pedal to the metal on this for sure. Otherwise, the only way we could get to zero is by keeping a lot of people in poverty.
Okay. So the second question I have is, you mentioned the idea of having a ship that could be a generating facility that could be brought into disaster areas. I'll be honest, I'm skeptical that can be done. I mean, not the sense of having a floating generation, but to actually tie into the grid. The time it takes to order, transmission equipment is on the order of years. So the idea that you would have this stuff at the ready to quickly hook up doesn't seem practical or realistic to me. So my question is, have you seen that anywhere in the world where at a grid scale level where energy could be brought in and hooked up that quickly like that?
Yeah, I mean, I would actually have to get back to you on this because I think this has already been done, but I just am not having the resource at the forefront of my mind. Transmission, it's not like the next day you're going to have a fully powered grid up and going. It's going to be a piecemeal system, but generally transmission takes less time to get up than generators do to get up. So having a generator there can speed up that process. It doesn't mean that you immediately have a modern grid that's fully functional. But I appreciate that, you know, you're trying to think through how can this be done, and I will try to get back to you with those resources, because I believe it's already been done.
Okay, well, I'll just point out that one of the problems at Fukushima was that they couldn't hook up a backup power system quickly enough to stop that disaster. So I really think that it's not I mean, it was touted as one of the advantages, and so I'm just curious to know if it's a realistic advantage or not.
Yeah, I mean, I'm pretty sure.
James, you got a question?
Yeah, just a quick one on deployment. You say that you've got a prototype or maybe a full working model. I don't know how you described it, coming up in the mid-20s. I was just wondering if we had the capabilities within the country to do large forgings for new reactor vessels.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, there's a lot of different countries that do forgings for reactor vessels. You know, for a lot of
I was wondering
reactors,
I was wondering specifically if here in the US we did.
Well, for one thing I want to point out is that we're talking about systems that often advanced reactors, and our reactor specifically, is not a pressure vessel. So it's not pressurized. Like a lot of current nuclear power plants are very high pressure. So it's not needing to be built to the same like ASME, the American Society of Mechanical Engineers standards surrounding that stuff. But so it could be a completely different. You could get it from somewhere else. It wouldn't have to have the same technical capabilities. I don't know where we're sourcing that from. I know that most vessels are a lot of vessels are currently made in Spain, and that some are made in Korea. But I don't actually know where we source that in the U.S. yet. That's not my area within my office. So I'd have to look it up.
Yeah, I was just wondering about the practicalities of actually, if the technology was accepted, you know, how soon we'd be able to do it, because we obviously heard with Vogtle 3 and 4 and Oklo and so on and so forth that we were going to use modular construction. Everything was going to be hunky-dory, and then there were a number of issues with actually implementing the thing.
Yeah, that's fair. We're a lot smaller. And so it's also a lot completely different, you know, power line, and they're all going to have all of these things are going to have their issues. That does not, like, it's all going to be a learning process. I mean, these are inherently safe things, so safety is not the concern, but as we deploy our first one, we're going to learn more about how to deploy them quicker, because that's what you do. As you build more things, you learn, and you can then build those faster. You know, nuclear is going to have, it's not going to be an easy problem to solve to scale these up, and but that's also true about wind, solar, and everything else that we need to really decarbonize the world. So, you know, these are problems that I see as solvable, and we have solved in other industries. So that's.
But it's not pressurized. Just the thing, it's not pressurized. You're using a sodium moderator of some description.
No, no, we're not using we're a fast reactor for one, so we don't use a moderator at all.
Okay.
But also we also don't use sodium. But so it's just.
But you've got a heat exchanger to drive a steam turbine. Is that right or not?
It's not a steam turbine for us, but we do have a heat exchanger with a supercritical carbon dioxide cycle.
Oh, okay. Fair enough. Thank you.
So we don't actually use any water, which is kind of cool.
But it's going to be pretty darn hot.
How do you generate the electricity without a turbine?
It is with a turbine. It's just not with a water turbine.
So we're bumping up.
What do you wait a minute? What kind of turbine is it?
It's supercritical carbon dioxide flowing over a turbine.
Oh, I see. Okay.
So we're bumping up against the bottom of the hour, so we're going to forego our short talks until another time. But let's let's have one more question for Emma before we wrap up. There's a bunch in the chat, but I'd rather have somebody just ask that question. So anybody have a question?
I have a question about the use of nuclear waste as your fission source. Can you talk a little more about that?
Yeah, that's a great question. Something I love talking about. You know, it's 90 to 95% of what is currently considered nuclear waste is a type of uranium. It's uranium-238. And uranium-238 can be used, can be fissioned directly actually in a fast reactor. We don't have fast reactors really. We don't have any fast reactors in this country currently, but we've ran them. You know, they were actually the first reactors were fast reactors. And so you can fission uranium-238 directly, or you can turn it into another material that works great as fuel. So this has been, that's what we, you know, are ultimately planning on doing. So, you know, it just requires taking the fuel and undergoing fuel fabrication to have it like, you know, made the right dimensions for our reactor. We use metal fuel, so it's pretty easy to mold.
Okay. Well, great. Well, thank you. And I think we could go on with this. Greatly appreciate your speaking to us tonight. I think it's a really interesting topic, not without its own kind of share of fair or unfair controversy, right? So it's really good to get educated on this so that, you know, people can be informed and make informative decisions about their own point of view. So
yeah, thanks so much. And I know that we're all, you know, we all have the same goals in mind. We all have the same things that we want to see, which is just you know, a clean energy future for people. And it's going to be hard. And so I'm glad we're all working on it.
great. Well, thank you. And so just again, thank you, Emma. Thank you, Eric, for putting this together as well. And thanks everybody who attended tonight. And again, just a reminder, please register for our November 8th John Foley event. It promises to be an outstanding discussion and presentation. So with that, I'll let everybody go. Thank you very much and have a great evening.
Yeah,
Thank you.
As usual, if anyone wants to hang around and talk, we'll keep the chat room open for a while. So
Yeah, thank you, Emma. Thanks, Charlie.
Thanks.
Thanks, Tim. Thanks, everyone. Eric.
Cheers.
To whom it may concern, the comment was made in, Hobie made a comment about using En-ROADS to kind of put this in context. And I would definitely like to talk about that. I've used En-ROADS quite a bit. And during this conversation, just as a teaser, I've been playing with the parameters on it. And if we do several key things to drive carbon out and to make room for this new fission type energy, we could achieve, according to this model, 50% of world energy, not just electricity, from fission. So I think for the future, I think that would be a very interesting discussion to have.
yeah,
Cool.
and
And
I
I'm-
was. Oh, sorry. You go first.
Yeah, I was just gonna say I'm happy to hang out for a little bit. Yeah, and there's some great questions in the chat as well that I'd love to answer. So
Okay, I was going to ask about the amount of fuel that's available, and we're using low-level waste. Is there plenty of it around to last, you know, to cover a good portion of the world for decades and decades, or how limited is it?
yeah, we have in this country we have about, in our nuclear waste alone, we could power our electricity, meet our electricity needs. If our electricity needs don't grow, this is a very simple model. So, I mean, you know,
Sure.
it'd be less than this, but for about 500 years on our nuclear waste. And so
Is that 100% for that long?
it would be, you know, 100% of our electricity needs. And we're hoping, of course, that our electricity needs double or triple, because we're trying to make, you know, more than that even, actually,
you
because we
bet.
want
Yeah.
our industry and transportation to move to electrification. So so it'd be less than that, but yeah, so that's huge. it's
Wow.
only waste if you waste it. But one other question is like, what waste does the fast reactor generate? And there is waste from a fast reactor. So there's, that's why I say reduce the waste burden. So, a fast reactor, how nuclear fission works is there's a big atom, the uranium, which is the, the largest existing, largest naturally existing element out there. And when a neutron comes in and it's captured by this big atom, it splits into two, and then it shoots out 3 neutrons. And those 3 neutrons go and are captured by other atoms, and this process continues. That's what a chain reaction is. But when you add up those little parts, so like the two things that split apart, which are called fission products, and the 3 neutrons, if you add up their masses, they actually have slightly less mass than the original big atom. And that's how we get the energy, is energy equals mass times the speed of light squared. And so it's actually mass being converted directly into energy, which is really cool. But the reason I told that whole story around the waste is because those fission products, those 2 smaller things, those fission products, that is the waste that you get out of a fast reactor. And it'll last about 300 years before it returns to background radiation levels. And so it's not, it's not this, millions of years or hundreds of thousands of years that you talk about today. And how you deal with that is you vitrify it, is what it's called. And vitrification is the process of turning it into glass. And then you turn it into like a glass, and you store it in certain conditions. But 300 years is something, when you're talking geologic time, it's not a lot. So yeah, that's some extra context. But.
Is that vitrification an established process? I know they've been testing it. Are they sure it's going to work now?
It's been done at PNNL for Pacific Northwest National Lab for a while. I don't know the complete development of it. Of course, all of these things need to be scaled up, but the fact that they've been shown to that we can do it and that they maintain a stable state is then the problem is just scaling, which is while it's a huge challenge, it's technically feasible.
Okay, promising, but time will tell. Okay.
That's the case with everything we're doing. I mean, they're not everything that we're doing in clean energy in general. I mean, same with batteries, same with so many areas. And this is more proven in some ways, but dinner. But it was really nice. Thanks so much for inviting me, and I hope you guys have a wonderful night.